Recently, Kenda came out with a brand new KR20A for the 15-inch wheel. All small wheel boys can rejoice, even though I know some people don't think 15s are small. But let's take a look. This is the new 300 treadwear KR20A and a 205/50/15. A little while back, I was able to run a couple sets of these in Texas at the Houston Police Academy with Lone Star Drift to see how they compared to other tires that I've ran and tested before. I'm gonna break this down to a couple of different categories. We've got price, we've got consistency of grip, we've got the level of grip, and we've got tire life. Also, a few honorable mentions as far as features of the tire itself. So let's compare some prices. The new Kendas were $85 a pop at wholesale. So that means at retail, they're probably about 100 to 120 bucks a piece, depending on how good your tire hookup is. Now, compared to something like the Velino Griva, which is a very similar tire in terms of life, tread wear, and size, these are a little bit cheaper because I was spending about $125 a piece on the Velino Grivas during Drift Week, and I bought a lot of those. I like those tires, but they're just too expensive for what they are. So I guess, is the price worth it for these Kendas at $100 to $120 a piece? If you compare them to like the Hancooks, which is my favorite for life and price, right? They're a good balance. You'd have to get double the life out of these new Kendas to be able to justify the new Kendas over the Hancooks. But there's also the question about grip. Is the grip better on the Kendas? I would say that they are. They're definitely more grippy than the Hancooks. The Hancooks are a harder compound tire. I think they're like a 500 treadwear versus these are a 300 treadwear. It's a really good balance. And in terms of grip compared to the other Kendas and to the Velinos, I would say these are as grippy as the 195/55 KR20As in the 200 treadwear. So these ones are 10 millimeters wider and are similar in grip. And I would say these are even a little bit grippier than the Velinos, but very similar. But the problem I had with these is how the grip level changed as they got hot. When I test tires, I typically do them unheat cycled because I want them to be an even playing field between one tire to another to another. And having brand new tires to toss in the car without heat cycling equalizes things quite a bit. So the Kendas were super grippy cold. You get them warmed up, they feel really great and consistent. For probably 4 hot laps is what I would get out of them. And then I just noticed that I started to lose a little bit of grip. And then more grip and more grip. And as I drove a little bit longer, say 6 hot laps, they were really greasy.
So let's compare a pretty fresh lap to about 5 laps later when I noticed them losing grip. This is lap number 2. The first lap is warming up the tires. Here you can tell I'm in 3rd gear. I'm clutch kicking quite a bit to keep it out because they're really gripped up. And a little decel here, downshift in the 2nd, power on to stretch between the 2 corners. That 350Z in front of me, that's actually Alexi from Noriaro. This was super cool being able to drive with him, by the way. Now this is the hardest part of the track for me, is I had to stretch from this spot all the way to the next corner, and we kind of started calling it Power Alley. And you can see I really struggled to carry speed through there because I just couldn't find enough acceleration in the right kind of line and everything.
Okay, there we go.
Now here is lap 5-ish, and the tires are significantly lost grip here. You can hear as I'm coming in through this entry, I don't really have to clutch kick a bunch to keep it out. Still a lot of grip in 3rd, but not what I was expecting. And then coming out here, you can see I start swinging out pretty wide around these corners, wider than I really wanted to be, just because I didn't quite have the same amount of forward momentum that I had, and even though I'm carrying the same kind of line, it just isn't quite the same. And here, trying to stretch between the 2 was really hard, but the car, I overshot it here and carried too much.
Alright, these tires are too hot.
Yeah, your tires got greasy real fast.
Yeah.
What the heck? Wait, what do you want?
They're 205 Kendas.
Huh, they usually don't get greasy like that. That's weird.
When I heat cycled them, it seemed to remain consistent for longer, but getting 6 hot laps out of them just isn't quite what I would have expected out of the Kendas I've tested in the past, as well as things like the Velinos and other tires, where the Velinos I could go 10, 12 hot laps till they started to get greasy. But I think part of that is also due to my car setup and the pressures I run. I run 45 PSI in these. That seems to be what I need to be able to break them loose in first, second, and third gear. And in third gear, I found they're pretty gripped up until they got to that point where they're hotter, and then they felt really good. But when they're colder in second gear, they were better, and then once you got them hotter, they were kind of useless. So, you know, it's a balance. I could probably balance it out so that way they have more grip in second and less grip in third gear, you know, those different wheel speeds and different vehicle speeds. But as far as keeping a level playing field, not changing the vehicle setup, they did get a little greasy. But honestly, I don't know if that's necessarily a terrible thing. Because after about 5 hot laps, I'm pretty exhausted driving my car anyway. It's manual steering, big angle kit, so my arms get worn out, especially during summer. It's hot. In Houston, it was miserable, hot and humid. So after about, you know, 4 or 5 hot laps, I feel these tires getting a little greasy. I go, oh, cool. This is a good indicator for me to pull off and chill out. And that may not apply in every situation, but I kind of like that in Houston in the middle of summer. The other thing that this does is by having this greasiness as an indicator to pull off, it means that you're not gonna burn your tires all the way down to the cords in one session. Whether it's good or bad, I don't know. Consistency of grip is definitely a huge plus in my book. But in this situation where it was extremely hot outside, I kind of like using that as an indicator to be able to pull off the track and cool off. Take that for what it is, and know that when I did heat cycle the tires the next day, they're more consistent for longer, but they did still eventually lose the grip still. But if I let the tires cool off, say if I sat for, you know, a minute or two between laps, that was typically a lot better, and the tire and the grip level is pretty consistent. The big variable into determining dollar per lap, is it worth it for the life of the tires? Is the extra price of these tires worth spending for how many laps you get? I think it is. It's hard to say exactly how many laps I could get out of a set because I didn't kill an entire set there in Texas. I mean, I did 12 plus laps on a pair, and then there was a competition, so I grabbed the next set to heat cycle them and make sure that way I was gonna have consistent grip from the start to the end of the competition. I'd have 2 tires that were very similar without the need to heat cycle another set of tires or whatever, has that as a variable. So 12 laps, and I still had about half or a third life left. That's pretty good. I typically get about 18-ish laps out of a similar layout, similar wheel speeds at other tracks. And that's out of the Kendas, right? Out of the KR20As or the Valinos. So that's pretty good. As far as the hand cooks, honestly, the hand cooks, they usually get about 10 to 12 when they're done. So it's really close as far as if you're gonna get double the amount of life out of them. There are a few honorable mentions as far as features of these tires that I really liked. So the 195/55, the 200 treadwear Kendas, they had a lot of sidewall flex, which was not necessarily a bad thing in terms of contact patch and tire life, because as the tire rolls, you get a wider contact patch because the sidewall is not touching the ground. That's more rubber on the ground. That's, you know, when you initiate in a corner or whatever, the tire drags, it rolls over. But that creates like a spongy or a less precise feel. And it's not something I typically pick up on unless I'm running a really stiff tire or a really high treadwear, like a really hard compound tire. So I noticed that with these, the 300 treadwear tires, the car seemed a bit more responsive. It seemed like the sidewalls were flexing less, and a big part of that is the size. The 55 is actually a taller tire. Look at this video real quick, the 195 versus the 205.
Okay, here's the 195/55, and there's the new 205. You can see there's a pretty good difference in height. So this will sit lower because it's a 50 series sidewall. And then the width is there's a pretty big difference in width too. Let me see if I can show that. Like, pretty big difference there. So these should be way awesome. Even though they're 300 treadwear, they'll probably have a good grip like this.
You can see the size, the 195 is taller and narrower. The 205 is wider, obviously, and shorter. And so the shorter sidewall means a little bit less flex, a little bit more manageable, and the sidewall itself might actually be a little stiffer than the old ones. The other thing too is that the profile of the tire, the size of the tire, is much better for fitment. Where does the new 300 treadwear 205/50R15 Kenda KR20A fall on my scale? I think this is a better tire than the previous KR20A. The 200 treadwear 195, this is definitely better. And I think is better than the Velino's. It's a little bit cheaper, especially if you can find a homie to get you a wholesale hookup. And I think that it's a better performing tire than anything else that I've tested. Biggest drawback is that it does lose grip consistency when it gets hot. I've had other tires that a lot of people swear by lose the same level of grip. So like the Ironmans, those get really greasy for me. So this is kind of similar in that sense, but up until that point, it is way better. Plus, when those tires get greasy, that's when they blow apart. The Kendas, these, sure, they lost grip, but they still had a ton of life, and I didn't have any chunking or delam issues whatsoever. So yeah, I think these are the best tires I've ran. I'm gonna put them as like a 9 out of 10, because the only thing that would toss them to that 10 out of 10 mark would to get that grip consistency down. And maybe because these were an earlier batch, there's an issue, maybe they'll work it out. So Ed or Kenda, if you're watching, I really did like these tires. I just wish the grip was a little bit more consistent. And I wish they were more available at a little bit cheaper price. That wholesale price, $85 to $90, if that was retail, that would be fantastic. Retail being $100 to $125, that's the hard part.